We're reading from The Manipulated Mind by Denise Wynn, and we are still in Chapter 6, and this is video number 6. Finally, Kiesler comments on the fact that individuals seem to need to believe that their own actions are self-instigated, whatever the circumstances, a deception which may well arise because of an attack on one's freedom. Kiesler reports, when one's environment is effectively controlled by outside forces, then acting as if one's behavior was really self-derived is one of the few alternatives left open. In my own experience in a military training camp for recruits, I have found the percentage of recruits displaying hyper-military type behavior quite large. That is, people behaved in a military fashion even when it was not demanded nor suggested. He gives as an example soldiers who regularly marched from their bunks to the bathroom or who saluted other recruits. In behaving the same way in freer settings, one retains the perception of choice or self-responsibility in more prescribed situations. In effect, therefore, in rebellion against coerced behavior, an individual may be likely to adopt that very behavior to extremes to make believe it was his own, chosen by himself. In the Patty Hearst case, to be described in Chapter 7, one of the main objections to claims that she had been brainwashed into acting with the revolutionary group that captured her was that she actually stayed true to the group's ideals for 16 months after the majority of the army had been killed and she herself was living apart from the rest. No one suggested that any mental process such as Kiesler has just described was the motivation for her actions. A need to believe, perhaps, that she had gone along with what had happened to her because such a lifestyle was really her own choice. The complexities of commitment and reactions against induced commitment should not perhaps be too lightly dismissed in such a context. Resistance against the overt efforts of someone else to change one's opinion may lead to the very opinion change being sought, as Zimbardo shows. The idea for the person attempting the influence is to get the other to react against what he is being told, but to so arrange things that what the person is reacting against is in fact what he really believes. As Zimbardo puts it, reactance can be used in an ingenious way to get the person to disagree with statements that he or she would ordinarily agree, and to agree with statements that were previously disagreed with. The would-be influencer makes statements such as "you would have to agree that," or "there is surely no question but," and the view he then puts up is the view he is aiming to put down. So the committee member who wants the club outing to be arranged by train rather than by coach says, "Well, you must agree that coaches are a more pleasant way to travel. You can see the countryside." The other committee member, who really prefers coach travel, may be strung to say, "Oh no, they are not," because he resents being cornered and having it implied that there is no room for opinion on the matter. Jack Brem, the author of Reactance Theory, describes it as follows: the perception that a communication is attempting to influence will tend to be seen as a threat to one's freedom to decide for oneself. Here again, therefore, illusions of autonomy and self-motivations can lead people to be most prey to the influence of others. Cognitive dissonance. Why should actions so often shape our attitudes rather than vice versa? Much may be explained by Leon Festinger's cognitive dissonance theory, whereby people tend to search for justifications to reduce the tension created by holding two inconsistent attitudes or performing an act inconsistent with an attitude. On the simplest level, if a woman is choosing an evening dress and is undecided between a long blue one and a knee-length black one. Whichever she eventually chooses, she will have to justify her choice to herself. She decides on the black one and tells herself that the blue one would have been impractical anyway. If she had chosen the blue one, she would probably convince herself that the black one wasn't dressy enough. She needs to reduce the tension caused by the fact that she liked both but could only have one. Therefore, one had to be more right than the other. This is cognitive dissonance at its most basic and reasonable. But behavior based on the need to reduce dissonance can be far more subtle to detect and alarming in its outcome. Festinger proved the point when he studied the effects of cognitive dissonance on the beliefs of a small religious cult. The leader, Mrs. Keach, claimed that she received messages from beings on another planet, and that she had been informed that an earthquake and flood would signal the end of the world one day in December. But those who had been committed to Mrs. Keach would be saved by a spaceship the night before. On the appointed night, the followers waited anxiously for the spaceship, and of course it didn't come. Festinger was there because he was interested to see how the devoted followers would cope with the tension that would result from having believed and committed themselves to believe and then being proved wrong. The group was highly upset when midnight came and went with no sight of a spaceship. But then Mrs. Keach claimed to have received a message saying that the devotion of her and her followers had been sufficient to avert the impending disaster. The followers were then able to esteem Mrs. Keach again and continue their belief in her. Moreover, whereas before they had eschewed publicity, they now actively sought it in an effort to win more people over to their cause. If Mrs. Keach's followers had not heard the message, they would have had to see themselves as fools for believing her. They would have been of less worth as individuals. Therefore, whatever the belief, they would have seized on any way to continue to hold it that would satisfy their need for consistent behavior on their own part and for respecting themselves. In the same way, many devotees of spiritual healers who have been exposed as fakes continue to offer any magnitude of spirit themselves because of the insupportable psychological consequences of accepting they had been duped. I'll stop it right here because I'll overrun my time, and we'll pick up in the next video. We will be in chapter 6, and it will be video number 7. See you in the next video.